In case you're lost, this video is part of a sequence which spans the build of a 600cc Model 100 Panther engine in two parts, with a third of removing the old engine, and this, the fourth part, on fitting the rebuilt one into the frame. A fifth and final part will describe its first ride out. When we bench built the engine, its crankcases were secured temporarily with 3 long bolts. These come out to make way for a trio of 3/8 inch diameter engine bolts, strictly speaking studs as they have no heads, which clamp the engine plates. As an aside, the wooden wedges in use here were washed up on the bank of the River Colne, below Colchester in Essex, probably adrift from a local shipyard. The history attached to my tools brings extra pleasure to the using of them. But if I was to share the story of everyone, we'd never get any work done. Oh, look, just in shot here is my Elora socket set, bought new for £21. That's about 2 weeks' wages for me in 1965. That was the year I had my first motorcycle. In AF and Whitworth sizes, the set is a reminder of my youthful ignorance. That introduction to the pleasures of two wheels was a 2-year-old Honda Bentley CB92 with metric fasteners. Yes, I know, plenty of time for an old man's reminiscences when the engine is in. With it raised on the wedge, I get the jack underneath and make incremental adjustments until the first of 3 long bolts slips through. Easy enough then to tilt the engine and align the rest. They are different lengths, a short one for the engine plates alone, a longer one to include the front lower chain case bracket, with the longest securing right and left footrest brackets. Fitting the decompressor lever is a fiddle because the cast cover must be almost closed to let it slip over the spigot and under the tab on the exhaust rocker. Settle the lid in place on its gasket and add the 7 bolts and washers, with the longer one at the centre of the curved side. Nip them up, add the saddles and their bolts and spring washers, but don't fully tighten them yet. The head-to-frame fittings don't always align easily. A magazine article of many years ago, entitled "How It's Done in the Factory," showed a mechanic with his size 10 boot on the crankcase, adjusting the fit. My method is a little more refined. A lever through one coat hanger into the frame lug to align that on the opposite side. The 2 steel thimbles are slightly tapered, and the through stud pulls them fully home. With the hanger bolts and the 3 engine plate fixings tightened, we have a viable frame once more. A spare magneto, timed when the engine was built, was snaffled during trials with our recalcitrant Panther and sidecar. More of that little problem in a later video. With the head on, we can't apply a dial gauge to the piston, so need another method to find top dead centre and set a pointer for our timing disc. If you've ever fiddled a pencil stub or the handle of an artist's brush down a spark plug hole, you'll know the frustration of its little dance as the piston rises, pauses, and begins to descend again. Incidentally, you may also have discovered what happens when you forget it's there and kick the bike over. This particular disaster was not mine, though I was involved in a wire and glue fishing expedition. Borescopes are wonderful things, aren't they? With a dead stop, the guesswork of finding top dead centre is gone. I'll add a link in the video description to David Witt's instructions on making one. With the piston rising on the compression stroke, fit it in place of the plug, attach the disc and set up a pointer. A bit of wire attached to a suitable bolt is often used. My snippet of white tape on the footrest hanger serves the same purpose. To bring the piston up gently until it meets the stop. Make a note of the degree reading, remove the dead stop and take the piston over compression. Now replace the stop and wind the crank backwards until it makes contact in the opposite direction. Note this reading. Top dead centre is precisely between the two, so set the crank at that position, align your pointer with 0 on the disc and wind the engine back by the required number of degrees, in this case 33. And now, with the lever on the handlebars set to full advance, slide the magneto into position. An unexpected difficulty, a gumption trap, appears. P&M changed the Oldham coupling, the magneto drive designed to sidestep small misalignments, from a Maltese cross sliding element to a square one, about 1950. And guess what? Our drive is the later type, but our spare element is the early one. All is not lost though, because we have the material and the tools to make one. Synthetic resin bonded fabric, SRBF to its friends, comes in a variety of grades, with charming names like Swan, Carp, and the grade we need, Whale. Scribe a 1.5 inch square on a 1/4 inch thick sheet, mark the centre and bore a hole to clear the nut. Best done before you cut, so there's still something to grasp. Our step drill makes a clean job if we approach from either side, even adding a little chamfer as the next size touches. Hacksaw the block a fraction over size and file for a perfect sliding fit. This stuff is up to practically anything as long as the magneto bearings and their insulation washers are in good condition. If there's a clonk when you turn the mag by hand, investigate. So now the points can be set just opening using the traditional fag paper, a slip of plastic bag for non-smokers. I put a smear of grease on before final assembly. Draw the magneto away with its coupling held into the taper and nip nut against washer. Put it back and recheck. In a perfect world, with light pressure against the direction of rotation to take up any slack, you should feel a little resistance from the plastic bag, which comes free as soon as you move the control towards retard. Fully tighten the nut, put the high tension cable back on the plug, and we're done. As soon as we persuade our makeshift feeler gauge that we have finished with it. So to the primary drive. You'll never keep all the oil inside, but a smear of silicone gasket goo at the front does help. Most crankcase bosses are worn by years of battering. Chain cases should be held at 3 points once the cover is on, but because alignment can be tricky, they often rely on just a top stud to the battery carrier. The clutch bearing is first. That built-up assembly of side washer, centre track and rollers. A smear of grease lets us stick a few rollers to the top where the basket can be hung on them and the rest inserted. 24 in total. Finish with the outer washer and spacer, or ditch the spacer if you are fortunate enough to have the stronger, long-splined clutch centre. This should be just proud on the spindle, so that the washer and nut bear on the clutch, not the spindle. The locking washer slips over the stud, do up the nut tight and lift the edge of the washer against it. Any slight play here will soon knock out the splines. Fit the clutch plates, plain first, followed by alternate, inserted and plain. Pushrod, pressure plate, cups, springs and nuts follow. Tighten the nuts until the springs just disappear. Put the bike in second gear and spin the assembly from the rear wheel while operating the clutch. If it wobbles as it turns, tweak up the nuts on the high side and loosen those on the low side until it doesn't. And don't mention Velocet clutches unless you have an hour to spare for a lecture from owners on how simple they are to adjust. Clean the tapers and refit the engine shaft sprocket with its lock washer and breather nut. Of course, you've already checked operation of the breather disc. Tighten the nut and bend up the lock washer. Now we can fit and adjust the primary chain and check play on the final drive, adjusting as required. Refit the chain case cover with a smear of silicone, a paper gasket, or whatever delights you. Its three fixings are a long upper stud at the front of the battery carrier, plus brackets fixing to the front lower engine bolt and the rear frame stud. There are lock washers available for the exhaust rings, but I haven't found them essential as long as the nuts and threads are in good condition. It's easier to fit the slides if you tilt the carburetor sideways on a single flange bolt. Do up the top ring, fit the second bolt and snug everything up. reconnect fuel pipes, add the tank, its rubbers, studs, washers and nuts. Attach the earth F and D wires to the dynamo. Now fill the crankcase with your favourite oil to the upper of 2 marks on the dipstick. This provides the extra required for filling a dry engine. That is one with assembly oil on its surfaces, but an empty sump, timing chest and flywheel case. Maintain oil to the lower mark in use. And so the moment arrives when I have to decide how honest I'll be about the number of kicks it takes to get the new built motor running, or if I'll apply a little judicious video editing. Well, here's the truth of it. Quite a few kicks. Watch carefully and you may spot the moment when I realise that this magneto control is tight wire advance and I am steadily retarding it, so reducing my chances of a start. A warm-up and a set of tappets to the recommended nil with a hot engine. A tighten of the U-bolts and the fore and aft head to barrel studs. I'll do them again when we've covered a few miles. Just a squirt of oil on the primary chain in case the drive has to come apart again. Top up the gearbox with semi-fluid grease, and with all adjustments done, give it a brief run. All seems well, but I'm currently devising a route for a 100-mile ride for my local vintage motorcycle club section. If I ride the Panther, I can be sure of some, let's say, constructive advice in case of teething troubles.